Worryometer and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. We have with us Delegate Matt Morgan and Delegate Brian Chisholm, both from the state of Maryland. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be back.
This podcast is called CNN's Worryometer, and we do have a dumbest bill in America. So why is there a worrymeter at CNN? Because at CNN, all they really care about are the midterm elections. That's all they care about. And Van Jones was on CNN with Chris Cuomo, and Chris Cuomo was interviewing Van Jones about what's happening with the stimulus bills. Because, you know, when you're CNN, you have to spend lots of money and you have to promote that because otherwise the country's going to fall apart if you don't spend $5 trillion. And so Van Jones talks about this, and Chris Cuomo talks about, what's your worrymeter about the midterm elections, which, by the way, are a little bit more than a year away. It's a ways away, but that's what they're worried about. We have that clip, and here it is.
Where are you on the worryometer about the midterms?
Look, I'm worried right now because, he, like I said, he's not getting credit for the great stuff that he's done because he promised more and hadn't delivered yet. And so I'm worried. At the same time, I do fundamentally think that we're going to be in a better place with regard to COVID this time next year. You had the number earlier, almost 80%. We're getting close to herd immunity. If you stop with Delta, if you don't wind up with an Omega variant, I think this time next year, cases are down, gas prices are down, jobs are up, and he's got some real legislative wins. But if any of those four go the wrong way, if cases are up, gas prices are up, you still can't pull a legislative win, we're in very deep trouble.
So that's Chris Cuomo and talking to Van Jones about the worryometer, as he calls it, the worryometer, because all they care about, again, at CNN is, what's it going to look like a year from now? Is there going to be inflation? Are they going to be able to pass the bills? Are Democrats going to be wiped out? Gentlemen, what do you think?
The first thing that comes to mind is, has the Obama administration ever really left? And I mean that sincerely. When Van Jones is speaking, they were the ones that decided to wiretap Trump, to spy on Trump, to try to destroy him. So their agenda is still in place because if you look now, I understand as President of the United States, and Matt Walsh describes him best as a senile bag of oatmeal. And that's true. I don't think he's really in charge. I don't know who's in charge, but it goes to show how ignorant Van Jones really is. He says he's got a couple wins. What? By spending more money. But we're at the highest inflation rate in 30 years. And most economists will tell you it's not going to stop. And who does that hurt? It hurts everybody, but it hurts the ones that they always claim to protect, the poorest among us, the ones that can't afford $3.50, $4 gallon gasoline, can't afford a $4, $5 bread now. It is absolutely sickening to me what they are doing to the people they swear to protect. It's destroying America from the inside out. And Van Jones's big concern is, are we going to win another election?
Exactly. And what do you think, Matt, about this?
Well, they shouldn't win another election ever again, how this administration has been behaving the last 10 months. They were handed basically a gold platter. They came in office and said, here's a vaccine, take care of it. We've passed up more deaths this year than last year as far as COVID goes. And it doesn't make a difference what this administration does. It seems to be always slipping on everything. From the withdrawal of Afghanistan to people forget that we passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill back in March. And, Brian touched on it. Inflation's going up. I think we're at 5.9% inflation rate. I mean, this is the second coming of the second term of the Jimmy Carter administration at this point.
Well, Carter's was different, though. We have a real problem with supply chain management right now.
Well, this is what happens when you pay people to sit at home.
And I think Van Jones obviously does not understand how an economy works. An economy is run by production, not consumption. And I think a lot of Americans misunderstand that. It is not, you can't just spend your way out of this. The more money you put out there and we don't produce, the bigger this problem is going to be. And I believe, my conspiracy theory, call it what you want, the whole vaccine mandate is part of trying to disrupt that supply chain. People think that they don't like this. They love this. They absolutely love this. And that's what Who
loves it?
I think the administration, I think the left hates America. They hate production. They think that we're an illegitimate country. So if you can put this into place, and now you're forcing government really to...
Well, they certainly don't think we have borders, that's for sure. So they don't even think we're a country.
Which feeds more.
Well, if you're out to destroy the country, what would you do differently?
Exactly. I mean, this is the perfect destruction of America plan.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I think sometimes we focus a little bit too much on what system they want to replace. We'll come out, you're socialist. I think from the radical to left, they're so miserable in their day-to-day lives that destruction is the point. That is the goal. And
then rebuild with what? This is what I always ask, because I actually do agree that the left wants to destroy the country, and then do what?
Well, every solution they propose has them making the decisions for you. I mean, when was the last time anyone in the Democratic Party came out with a solution that enabled more freedom?
Right.
No.
They don't control the private sector, and that's the problem. And that's why this.
Well, they want to control the private sector. And
well, they're going to say things like, and here's what's interesting. They're going to say, oh, well, we want nationalized free health care for everyone, and that creates more freedom. But what we've learned through this pandemic is that when the government controls your health care, that you no longer make your own decisions about your own body for your health care.
It's interesting to see them make these arguments on education, on health care, and then watching people stream across the border, fleeing those countries that offer free health care and the education that they're talking about.
Yeah, they always want to come to the U.S. because, right, they can't really get health care in their countries because it's free, but it's rationed so much it's not available. So it's free is actually nothing more than a euphemism for it's really not available.
And it's anecdotal, but the Southwest issue right now with a lot of their pilots didn't want to take the overtime, really, is what happened. So they had to cancel 1,800 flights over the weekend. They're out to 2,500. And most of them are military pilots that have said, we've seen this tyranny roll out in other countries, and it's bad. And we're not going to stand for this, because when they take that oath as a military member, they say, we will defend this Constitution, both foreign and domestic. And there's no doubt, Matt hit on it. This is an assault on the United States of America from our own administration. And if anybody tries to cut it differently, they have nothing to
They
stand
weaponize government for sure. And CNN, of course, all they care about is the Worryometer, because they're like, well, we might lose in the midterms. We might not pass all of our huge spending bills. We might not get to that point where we destroy America. And also taking to task CNN is Joe Rogan. So I'm not sure, podcast listeners, if you remember, for the past year and a half plus, CNN railing against ivermectin as one of the drugs that you could potentially take, obviously with proper doctor's advice and advisement and a prescription, to be able to combat COVID, okay? And there are countries in the world that have been doing this and doing it successfully. At least that's what it appears to be the case. Well, Joe Rogan has been talking about this. And of course, Joe Rogan is so big, he's not going to get deplatformed. So, but it hasn't stopped CNN from criticizing Joe Rogan, because Rogan has been asking the critical questions for a year and a half. While most of us on the conservative side, and I don't know what Rogan is, and it doesn't really matter, but one thing's for sure, he's a critical thinker. He's not afraid to ask the questions, and he's not even afraid to put his reputation on the line, because the guy's already making $100 million plus. So if they deplatform, he's like, fine, I've been paid. He has no fear of losing his livelihood because he's already a very wealthy man. Well, Jim Acosta of CNN constantly criticized Joe Rogan. And Sanjay Gupta, who's the doctor at CNN, also talked about how ivermectin is bad and you should never use it. And podcast listeners, if you're online and you look at these articles, you'll see one after another from CNN. And some cases, they actually came out front criticizing Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan invited Sanjay Gupta of CNN onto the Rogan podcast, right? And he did so under the premise that they would talk about Gupta's book, among other things. Didn't go too well. I can't wait to hear Matt and Brian talk about this. This is about 1 minute and 30 seconds long. It's worth listening to, podcast listeners. It is epic because Joe Rogan calls out the fake news. This is epic because this guy is not on the right or the left. He's definitely in the middle. We have the clip, and here it is.
Horse dewormer's not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing. That's a lie that they're conscious of. This is not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it winning the Nobel Prize in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous. It's just a lie.
I don't think anyone is.
But don't you think that a lie like that is dangerous on a news network when you know that they know they're lying? You know that they know that I took medicine. Like, here it is.
He's showing him the ivermectin.
This is ivermectin.
You got
this
it
is
with
right
you.
here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
I mean, what did they say?
They lied and said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
they
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other medications.
Guys, listen. It's one thing if Donald Trump and all of us call CNN fake news and talk about how they lie. It's a completely different thing when Joe Rogan does that, because that reaches a lot of people in the middle and also on the left. What do you guys think about this epic interview?
Well, I think they lie. I mean, I'm glad he called them out for it because they do. And, when you have doctors, you come up in there like you're an authoritarian figure and people watch it and stuff like that. And there's been numerous studies on the benefit of taking this. Same with hydrochloroquine. And they just come out and lie.
Well, what's the difference between this and the vaccine?
Well,
it's free. You can make your own choice to do it. It doesn't go through the government, and it doesn't benefit them, the ones that want control. And that's what they want. They want to control everything. This has nothing to do with health. I'm tired of talking about it. It's got nothing to do with saving lives. It's got to do with government control, and that is it.
Of your healthcare.
And they know it.
Well, I think it has to do with health, but at the cost of people getting better.
Right.
So, I mean, think of the evilness of this when you're willing to perpetuate a lie that you know is going to result in people possibly dying. This is evilness.
Well, wasn't it funny how Sanjay Gupta goes, well, this is all like moving really fast here. I mean, because that's not what he thought he was going there to talk about. And well, of course, guys, when you're on CNN, you're not used to having to defend your positions because
they live in a silo.
It's an infomercial in a silo, precisely. But it's obviously not a news channel. It's just an infomercial. And then there he is for the first time, a doctor, an alleged man of science, actually having to defend himself in front of all people. Joe Rogan, whose audience is not conservative, whose audience is not Democrat or independent. Sure. It's really cuts across a broad spectrum. And more importantly, really hits millennials in a big way. So millennials are hearing this now, and the millennials are probably like, yeah, CNN is full of shit. That's going to crush CNN.
And that's the thing. Joe Rogan's got such a big following and so many listeners because he's got that audience of people that trust him, believe him, like his show. There might be some people that are listening just to disagree, but I would say the vast majority of the people are like, he's right, because it makes common sense.
It does.
I mean, Matt and I we all know somebody that is helping with the treatments and the antigens, and you want to talk about evil. This federal government, this administration is cutting off certain states from the treatment. So we have treatment in this country right now that's guaranteed to save 100% of the people that are treated with it. But what do? The federal government bought up every bit of the doses they could and started to cut it off from states that they wanted to go against.
Well, it's called rationing. You either do what we tell you to do, or they're going to find some new creative way to punish you.
But what Brian's saying is they're weaponizing medicine that could save your life by not giving it to you unless you comply. And that is Obamacare. This is what we all said when Obamacare came forward. We said this is exactly what eventually will happen, except that now, because of a pandemic, we're seeing it through really clear lenses. That's exactly what will happen if we allow this to continue.
That's right. And they can't control some of that's why they never want to talk about natural immunity, because immunity, it doesn't go through the federal government. It's your human body, and they hate that. They hate you taking care of yourself.
You mean my body, my choice?
Yeah, your body. That's right.
So next up, podcast listeners, Terry Mcauliffe, who's running for governor of Virginia, and the election is just right around the corner, by the way, continues his anti-parent crusade. So get this. Democrat Virginia gubernatorial nominee Terry Mcauliffe declared that he plans to build education just 2 weeks after he created a firestorm by saying parents should have little say in what public schools teach their children. So here's what happened. Terry Mcauliffe was in a building. He was having a meeting, and a news reporter, obviously someone who cares about education and keeping parents in charge, asks Terry Mcauliffe as he comes out of the building, and Terry Mcauliffe walks down the stairs from the building, and the reporter asks him the question, who should be in charge of kids' education? So Mcauliffe spotted this reporter. And so you could tell he was processing in his mind, Mcauliffe was, what he was going to say, how he was going to respond. Listen to what he says. We have a really short clip on this, and here it is.
Who do you think should be in control of education if not Virginia parents?
Vaccinated yet? That's the question I want to know.
Who do you think should be in control of education if not Virginia parents?
Governor, was it a mistake for schools to close last year? I'll build education. That's why Fox News has me leading. Len Young will destroy Virginia's education system.
Yeah, so there's Terry Mcauliffe. He's talking to this guy as he's walking, Mcauliffe is, and then gets into his car that's driven for him as fast as he can. But what does he do? Mcauliffe is outside. Mcauliffe is wearing a mask. It's beautiful outside. The weather is beautiful, the greater Washington area weather. And Mcauliffe says, why aren't you wearing a mask? Have you been vaccinated? In other words, I don't want, what he's saying is, guys, I don't want to talk about public education and who's in charge because I'm bought and paid for by the teachers union Met.
Well, he also followed it up with "you're dangerous."
Yeah, you're dangerous.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
think about this: if he's elected governor, is everyone going to be required to wear a mask at some of these football games I'm watching with Virginia Tech and UVA? Because I mean, you know, if that's his position,
you're dangerous. Put a mask on.
Put your mask on
and
shut up.
You've seen it across.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Shut up.
Take your vaccine, put your mask on, and shut up. That's what they want. And you can see it across the nation now. All these football games going on with people side by side, no outbreaks. Matter of fact, it's going down. And it's because, number one, we've known this from the beginning, at least, and we're not scientists. You cannot pass the virus on easily outside. It's almost impossible. They've proven pretty much the fact.
But Brian, that's not what government told us originally, because I remember them shutting down skate parks. I remember us taking off basketball hoops in Baltimore City. So government has had a horrible track record on this.
They really have.
I mean, the experts come out and said, well, shelter in place,
right,
which is a term they use for an active shooter.
Right.
Well, go inside where the virus is the most dangerous.
Right. Well, and it's exactly, but it's in fear. That's why they make you wear the mask. The mask is an illustration of fear, period. That's what it is. They want
and control.
But
Yep.
going back to the school boards, and I don't know if you guys saw this story, and I know it's not about what you just hit on, but this poor father whose daughter was raped in school.
Loudon County story.
Exactly. And now he's labeled a terrorist because he went to a school board meeting to defend his daughter. And this gentleman evidently raped somebody else. And the school board the school system tried to hide it.
Yes.
That is disgusting.
By transferring the kid and not telling anybody. I mean, you know, what's interesting is if you are a sex offender, of course, and you are an adult, your neighbors have to be notified if you're relocated into that neighborhood. And here you have a child. There's no doubt about it. He's a minor. And he is a sex offender. And the public school system doesn't feel obligated to tell anybody that this person exists, and then relocates him into another school, and he does the same exact thing again.
And unfortunately, it's not the only story.
I think on that story there, the troublesome thing there is the FBI comes out and or the Department of Justice are like, hey, we're going to charge parents as domestic terrorists who speak up at these school board meetings. Meanwhile, you have an entire school board and administration covering up an obvious sexual assault that happened at the school. That gentleman who's been painted as like a wingnut racist, his daughter had a positive rape test kit performed. I mean, obviously there was a sexual assault.
Yes.
And to this day, he's the only one that's ever been in jail. So, I mean, I think that's craziness. And Terry Mcauliffe wouldn't want to touch that story with a 10-foot pole. Probably the reason why he's driving away so fast.
Yeah, he knew it was going to come up, I think. And I think that one of the things that happened during COVID is a lot of parents got a a view into what really these kids are being taught in the classroom. And now we have homeschooling going through the roof. We have people who want to go to private school. If we really want to win as conservatives, I truly believe we have to have true school choice. No more charter school, no more boost. Let the parents decide, because what's going on in public school system now, and more people are waking up to it, is horrible.
I mean, should this be a commercial too? Because not just the other commercial that Glenn Youngkin is using of Terry Mcauliffe, where Terry Mcauliffe says, I don't think parents should be in charge of, education for their children. I mean, here is a clip here where Terry Mcauliffe says, when he's asked who should be in charge of kids' education, his response is, wear a mask. Are you vaccinated? You work for Fox News. It's a non-response. And it's probably one of the most important issues of our time right now, but it's been an important issue for a very long time. It's just that the pandemic is really accentuating the fact and bringing it to the forefront for the first time. It's also bringing to the forefront, as you mentioned, Brian, about this father's daughter. And Brian, Matt, you mentioned it too, that the father's daughter who was raped in Loudoun County Public Schools. And we have new sex ed courses, which are in the Common Core of curricula in public schools, which teach everything from gender mayhem, abortion as a positive thing. That's what they're teaching, as well as explicit images of everything and anything you can possibly imagine in public school as young as in K to 12. So it's in K to 12. Go ahead.
Isn't that kind of what's going on? You're starting to look around at, like, one of the most disappointing things have been, to me, over the COVID response, are millennials and college age students not rebelling. Take your vaccine. Yep. Put your mask on. Okay. You go to the college campus lately, I mean, everyone's like walking around outside with a mask on, not following really the signs of it, not trying to flee. And that's a new change in American society, that younger people are not rebelling against authority here. And the reason why is they've been conditioned for their entire lives. And that's really what I think the parents are pushing back on. It's like, what are you actually teaching my child in these classes?
Exactly.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because it's exactly right. And, the last administration, when Trump was in office, everybody was a fascist. But this is what fascists actually do. They start to control the mind at a very early age. That's why the Democrats want pre-K. They want that kid from 2 years old all the way through college. And it's a cultural war. We're never going to win. And they figured that out a long time ago. And if they have, obviously, severe reservations about parents making decisions for a kid, because then the parents are in charge of that kid's education and not them controlling it.
You know what I find it interesting about this entire subject of the public school system and how they're trying to sexualize children is, outside of K to 12 education, if you are an adult male, and let's face it, most of the pedophiles tend to be adult men, not adult women. But if you're an adult male and you are a pedophile, or let's just say you are a pedophile wannabe and you're trying to get a bunch of people around you who are minors, K to 12 age minors, and you show them pictures that they're showing you in public school and you talk about these same things, you would be arrested. You would be arrested. And what I think needs to happen in the public school system is we need school boards we need parents to file complaints against school boards and the individual teachers teaching this curriculum, and they need to be held to account. It's the only way, if they're arrested and actually then have to defend themselves in court, will they understand the fact that this is not the proper role of education. It's not the proper role of education to tell Johnny, who's 11 years old, that he might actually be transgender, and that to show all the pictures and how cool it is. I mean, they're really trying to make this actually a neat thing to do.
Well, exactly. And to me, politicians and people in the school board, they've been trying to fix education since education was created. And to me, the true fix for education is you've got to put in a system that allows the parents to be in charge.
That's right.
And ultimately of those dollars. I mean, you got to take the power out of the nameless, faceless bureaucrats at the state school board that you can't get an appointment with, that they don't really care. And you've seen it happen in real time over in Virginia at some of these school board meetings where they're just shutting down any type of dissent.
That's right.
And just like this father here, I mean, you hear the story and it's like heartbreaking. My question is, where is the media at? because that guy was locked up. This was like in June.
Yeah.
And we're just now hearing that. And here's what happens when the media doesn't do their jobs. Another victim was assaulted. And that's why this is coming up. So, like, we're not protecting our children. They're not doing their jobs. They were perfectly happy to use this guy as a face of some type of transphobic racism, when it turns out the guy's daughter got sexually assaulted in the school. That's insane that the administration wouldn't want to protect this.
And the
children.
superintendent and the board are like, well, it was our policy. We followed policy. And you're like, stop talking bureaucrat nonsense to me. You're all breaking the law.
So they allow sexual assault in there. That's their policy. How many? I mean, I mean, and for the Department of Justice to issue a letter saying, hey, we're going to go start looking at their parents and speak up against the CRT, then not to get out in front of this article. Well, they just look like a bunch of clowns, because that's what they are, a bunch of political clowns.
Well, doesn't that make them science deniers? Because that's what happened. In case anybody doesn't understand the story, it was a transgender male that went into the female bathroom and raped this girl.
Wait,
so you're a science denier if you don't believe in basic biological facts. This was a male.
I believe that a lot of conservatives brought up that scenario that could happen. It was shot down, that you're just, exaggerating things.
Right. And that you're anti-trans when you say, well, that can't happen. Of course, not only is it happening, but it's happening at a younger and younger age, because it's being promoted and taught and promulgated in public school as something that should be desirable. And that's and therefore they're acting out in public school. That's what kids do. And is it a surprise that they're acting out in public school?
Well, not only is it's happening, now it's being covered up.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the heads should be rolling there.
They should.
I mean, everyone should be fired. The community should come out together. And I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure Terry McAuliffe wouldn't have the gonads to do this. But I mean, this governor's candidates out there should be coming out and saying, you know what, if I was governor, the first thing my action would be is to fire that entire school board.
Absolutely.
That's clean house.
That's what a good governor or gubernatorial candidate would say. You're absolutely right.
We had our superintendent from our county school in front of us 2 years ago, and we started talking about the budget. And one of my big questions was, because it didn't make sense, we're spending $225,000 per classroom. I said, what do we pay in legal fees? He would not answer my question. And if nothing against him, I'm sure he was told never to answer that question. I think that this is a problem bigger than anybody ever knew. I think that the school systems are probably paying a lot of legal fees.
And the left has created this problem. The left has created this problem. So we need to move on to the next subject, which is about the Netherlands. Yes, that small country in Europe. The Netherlands, well, folks, the Dutch royals in the Wall Street Journal, the Dutch royals can marry same-sex partners without risking their throne. Now, before this ruling, if you wanted to do same-sex marriages, if you will, in the Netherlands, then you couldn't be a royal. But that has now changed. Now a royal can have a same-sex partner and still hold the throne. So in the Wall Street Journal, the Netherlands was the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage in 2001. Now the government says that any king or queen of the country wouldn't have to forfeit the right to the throne if he or she married someone of the same sex. The question is a challenging one for royal families, which have sought to move with the times. The statement of the government of the caretaker Prime Minister Mark Rutte came in response to requests by 2 Dutch lawmakers to clarify the government's position on the question. Royal marriages in the Netherlands require the consent of Parliament. But it's up to the government to introduce a bill to approve the royal union. And so there you have it. So now royals can do that. So apparently in the Netherlands, anyone can be a queen.
Is royal blood gone now?
So that's that. So how do you pass on the blood? Exactly. So this is what's interesting. I agree with you about this, because to be royal, in their minds at least, to be royal, the royals, it's the idea of, the oldest son becomes the king, right? Sure. And then who he marries becomes the queen.
The queen, and then
then that continues this bloodline. How does that work?
You're bringing up way too much science. Science doesn't matter.
I don't know.
We should ask Dr. Levine. Maybe she can figure it out.
What would CNN say? It sounds like they're trying out for maybe a new Netflix special.
What would Sanjay Gupta say on CNN?
What he would lie about it.
They thought this out. They do realize it's going to end at some point then, right?
I'm thinking like one generation.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
That's one way to get rid of the royals, you know?
Exactly. I know. I was thinking that when you said you could still hold the throne. I'm like, what is he talking about there?
Just until you die.
So go ahead, continue to talk. I want to hear more of this. This is good stuff. So do you think England's going to do the same thing? Are they going to follow? Do you see the UK doing this? I just don't for some reason. This is not to say that the UK won't allow same-sex partners, because it's been allowed for many years in the UK. I'm talking about when it comes to the royals.
I'm waiting for it to be mandated.
Yeah. You can have same-sex partner as long as they're vaccinated and wear a mask.
Well, I mean, you mandate it. I mean, you got to go woke or go broke, you know?
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
I'm not surprised by anything we see anymore.
They're speechless, podcast listeners. Yeah. That never happens with members of the House of Delegates.
Well, hopefully somebody that understands basic biology is going to step in and say, "I see a problem with this plan. It's not going to last very long if we go down this."
One thing's for
sure,
would
be immediately canceled.
Yeah, is anybody willing to
state visits will be fun, right?
That's
you know, when you got same-sex partners and you got the Queen who's a dude, you know, and you got the President of the United States, you know, and state visits are going to be definitely very interesting. There's no doubt. A lot more eventful.
Yeah.
So next up, podcast listeners, a young boy goes viral when he says, "Let's go, Brandon." So why does he do that? Well, because he was at a race, and let's see, what race was this, Matt? This was like a kid's dirt bike race or something like that somewhere in the South, I believe. And it's the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. That's what it was. And he was there, and he and two of his siblings or friends were allowed to say, "Start your engines," you know, so they really thought that was really cool. We have a clip on this. It's kind of funny because he didn't just say, "Start your engines." He went on beyond that. We have that clip, and here it is.
Parts, they're going to help kick this thing off. All right, guys, ready? In 3, 2, 1.
Drivers, start your engines. Let's go, Brandon.
The whole country, man. The whole country is going to "Let's go, Brandon," which is the nice way of saying the expletive to Joe Biden, right?
Yes.
So even the kids are doing that, which is pretty amazing. And I just think this needs to continue. And I can't wait, gentlemen and podcast listeners. We rarely talk about the fact that we are elected officials. And I know I don't. And there are a variety of reasons that I do that. It's to try to create that wall between the two. But I will say this. I am thoroughly looking forward to being on the floor of the House of Delegates at some point, and after a debate say, "Let's go, Brandon."
I was thinking that same thing yesterday. I'm like, who's going to be the first one? And like, I can't, you know.
Oh, you have to tell us beforehand, because I have to have my camera off for that.
The floor sessions are recorded.
But I want to see everybody's faces when he says it.
Here's a better one. So podcast listeners, you'll appreciate this. So in the Maryland House of Delegates, you have to be recognized by the speaker. So you have to say, "Madam Speaker." And then the speaker will say, "The gentleman from Calvert County," which would be me, right? And you get up and you could certainly say that or whatever you want to say. But you can also yield to other people. So for example, Matt Morgan here or Brian Chisholm here, both members of the House of Delegates, could get up and say, "Madam Speaker," and she could say, "The gentleman from Southern Maryland," or "The gentleman from Anne Arundel County," and they could say, "Let's go, Brandon. But first, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentleman from Southern Maryland." And then that gentleman can get up and say, "Let's go, Brandon." You can just go all day long doing that.
Something tells me she's going to find out about this before we do it.
Yeah. But
Well,
I'll tell you,
I'm not telling her.
Let's go, Brandon.
You don't think she listens to your podcast?
She might, actually. She
Let's
probably
go, Brandon.
laughing.
81 million votes. I can't imagine, you know, a president that was just so popular.
And it's so
less than a year ago. Now you have children mocking him.
And it was so organic. He's going to be the man of the year, and had no idea that really, I mean, he obviously won the NASCAR championship, and they start cheering in the background. And the reporter, I don't know, maybe she didn't really
Do you know they took that tweet down? NBC took the tweet down. It's like it doesn't even exist.
You could hear it as clear as day. Expletive Joe Biden, and she goes, "Oh, they're even cheering for you. Let's go, Brandon."
You know, let's play it. Let's play that. We have that tweet. Actually, let's hear it. Here it is, podcast listeners, one more time.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, "Let's go, Brandon." Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and just watch and learn. What did you learn that helped you there in those closing laps?
So So podcast listeners, it's just so epic. And now you have children, saying, let's go, Brandon. So it's obviously I don't want children to curse, so I'm not advocating this.
That's the beauty of this whole thing. I mean, if you go on Spotify and put clean and you put F Joe Biden, it actually says, let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
So it's for everybody.
Oh my God. So next up, podcast listeners, we have Go Woke or Go Broke. We've got a good one for you. So get this. Superman is bisexual. Yes. Marvel Comics, which has had Superman in newspapers and comic magazines for many, many, many decades, of course. And then Superman came to TV when TV was started with a comic program as well, right? A whatever you call it, cartoon or comic type program. And then to the motion picture, of course, with real people. And you had Christopher Reeves, you had all kinds of people be Superman. Obviously the idea of Superman is being this gentleman who is really well built. He's very masculine and he represents all that is good about America. So not only is the movie itself going to feature Superman as being bisexual, but in the Superman's son in the comic Superman. So on TV, you have a comic of Superman, comes out as bisexual in a new comic as well, I believe. It's his son that does that. So there's also the movie, and then you also have the son. And so, gentlemen, I think this is a new era in America because I think we should discuss it no matter what. Go ahead. What do you think, Brian?
I'm not going to assume too much, but I think Jimmy Olsen probably was too early. I think Jimmy Olsen always had a thing for Superman. And to be honest with you, I don't know. It's not shocking to me. They walk around in leather boots that are shiny and tights. And maybe he's always been bisexual. We just weren't woke enough to know it. And what little kid at 8 to 10 years old really cares who Superman is hooking up with? They want to know, is Superman a superhero? All of a sudden he went from stronger than a locomotive and leaping tall buildings to leaping from woman to man.
Because the difference, Brian, is, and I know that we're on the same side on this, but the difference is that Superman up until just recently, yesterday, was a guy who had this clean romance with Lois Lane.
I feel bad for Lois.
You didn't have the sexualization of Superman, but you had the chemistry that was there, but not the sexualization. And of course, the left has to sexualize what otherwise isn't a program about that.
Well, it goes back to what we were just talking about.
You feel sorry for Lois as well? Is that what you're going to say?
They want to control the culture. They want kids to think this is normal and you should expect this. And
Lois has been angry lately, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
well, maybe it wasn't so much the Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Well, it does bring new meaning to the Man of Steel, that's for sure. What I'm curious about is what happens when you have Superman become, this person, if you will, and what will his pronoun be? I mean, for example, what if he's at trans? It's like, look, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's they.
It's they.
It's there, it's them.
Well, my question is, it's
super they.
How does that
super they? Is that a pronoun? So if Superman is now gay, is Clark Kent gay?
Right. That might be his alter ego. That's his alter ego.
Well, it's not
right.
Clark. It's his son. It's something Kent.
It is Clark Kent.
No, his son. So Superman is the son of the original Superman.
Okay.
That's who's bisexual.
Okay.
Superman stayed straight, just so you guys know.
Is that okay. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I'm the
so
DC,
Superman
I'm the
had
DC
a gay
Marvel
son.
guy.
He's a DC Marvel guy who actually read the story.
I want to know what's going on at the halls of justice, though. What do they think? Is Aquaman open to this? Is Wonder Woman open to this? Who's with Wonder Woman now? Is anybody?
Wonder Woman's older.
Yeah. Well, maybe did she have a daughter?
Maybe.
She's now royal family.
Well, yeah, probably.
With the Queen.
So I'm just curious.
This is what happens with DC. It never happened with Marvel.
I agree with you there. What I'm curious about is this. Dr. Rachel Levine, she's the Ash, the Assistant Secretary of Health of the United States. She calls herself the Ash.
Everybody's favorite Ash right there.
She is quite the Ash. She, of course, is all about putting transgenders into sports, men and boys. Primarily in K-12 into women's sports as well as beyond. And she's all about that. She was questioned about this by ABC News. And this is directly related to this whole Superman thing because we know podcast listeners what's next, right? The next thing is transgender Superman. It's coming. We all know that. Well, we have a clip from Dr. Levine. We're going to talk about this in a minute and how it relates to Superman. We have the clip, and here it is.
What's your take on states trying to restrict transgender athletes from playing sports at high school and college levels?
I think that they're very challenging and unfortunate. I think that trans youth are very vulnerable. They have often faced significant bullying and harassment, and they need our support. They need to be nurtured, not to be limited from their activities such as sports.
Yeah, they should not be limited to activities such as sports. But the thing is Dr. Levine has later clarified that and said, well, what Dr. Levine really means is that boys should be able to participate in girls' sports, no matter what those sports are, and vice versa. But of course, it's very rare the other way around. It's usually boys, going and becoming a basketball star or becoming a track star. We mainly see the track star stuff, and it's becoming more and more common. And the thing is this is what the whole Superman is bisexual, Superman's son is bisexual thing is about, right? It's to go one step at a time to get to the point where you don't even recognize Superman anymore. It's no longer the Man of Steel. It's no longer the guy who people look up to with respect to all that is America, namely that, it represents a strong country and so forth. It's about just confusing the living out of people. Because remember, this is targeted towards whom? K to 12 children. Children, once again, sexualizing children to the full extent that the media and the mass media can possibly do. Gentlemen,
creating confusion and chaos, and that's what their end goal is always going to be, to reform America and the people into what their image is. And they don't like independence. They don't like the individual. They want groupthink, and that's what they like, because that's how they control. And once again, it goes back to control. And we have a massive youth suicide problem in this country, and we wonder why. And I know that people feel like right now, well, it's, things are tough out there. Yeah, of course. But this is still the easiest time in world history to be alive, not just in this country, but other places. It's not that other people don't have, but these kids have a suicide problem, and they have all of this at their fingertips, all of this access to whatever they need. And it's because of people like Dr. Levine who want to go in and just disrupt their mind and tell them what you think is normal is not normal. We're going to tell you what's normal. What's normal is Billy is now a girl or Jane is now a boy. Mm-hmm. And that screws with a youth's mind. And that's what they want.
And Brian, of course, just a few years ago, I would most certainly take my son at the age of 5 or 6 to see Superman. In fact, that was something that we would look forward to. Not now.
No,
not now, because now, of course, it's the 5 or 6 year old. Can you imagine taking a 5 or 6 year old to see this?
Well, they're trying to normalize the abnormal, because Dr. Levine, she's not. That's just not normal. And the problem is when you're talking about like high school sports or youth sports and stuff like that, no one talks about, like, on a basketball team, the fifth girl that's now made to sit on the bench,
right? Because
the boy that's playing in that sport is better. And what about that? And this is a big deal for our society, because, the one thing I have definitely changed my opinion on in the last 20 years is extracurricular activity in the schools. I think it's completely, like, it's necessary. It should be a priority that we have that stuff. You look at society and how people, when I was growing up, very rarely did you have parents that were not, or friends that were not married, or all your friends were married. Now,
you mean your friends' parents were married?
Your friends' parents were married, right?
Yeah.
Now you have like single family households, and people are missing those father figures, there's mother figures that a lot of time a coach feels that role in, and that with the social media and stuff, these kids don't really have real friends anymore. You spoke to the suicide. They have digital friends.
Right.
And extracurricular activities are one way they have friends, and we should be getting them involved. And I think this is really to the detriment to everyone.
I agree. And I also think that with the Superman thing and the other stuff that we've talked about during this podcast, and other podcasts as well, is that I actually believe this. I actually believe the left is trying to normalize sex between adults and children. I literally think that that's where they're heading with all this, because otherwise, why would they be doing this? Why would they be pushing this information to children and taking what otherwise Superman is a really clean program that has nothing to do with sex whatsoever, other than, you know, the infatuation kind of thing. It's kind of a side picture of that. But instead, they're trying to make something that's wholesome into something that's complete. I've thought this for a while, because why else would we be teaching the crap that we're teaching in public schools with respect to this? That's its purpose.
And I'm sure both of you get this question, and it's a small subsect, but it goes nationwide. The question I get a lot is, what's the biggest problem in Baltimore City? And my answer is always the same. It is the destruction of the family unit. Because what they did is went in and destroyed the family unit. And with these kind of things, with the Superman, it's to say you don't really need a husband and wife. You don't need to procreate. We're going to create your own little world out there. And to Matt's point, kids are looking for a mentor. They follow. They look for. And the problem in Baltimore City is it becomes the gangs, and that's why
that becomes their father figure.
That's right. Instead of a coach. And God bless some of those coaches that come out of Baltimore City and take the youth and know how important it is, because they've probably been through the same thing. But the problem right now is they don't. They're going into the gangs, and that goes nationwide when they think that two mommies can make a baby, and they get confused. You can't.
Well, that's called reproductive justice.
Right.
That's what that's called. You know, that's the Democrats call it reproductive justice, that men can be pregnant and that two women can somehow manage to get pregnant as they, you know, in a natural way, of course. And they're trying to say the same thing, that a man can get pregnant, of course. But this is obviously, you know, it's none of it's science-based, of course, but that's the whole point of this. So next up, podcast listeners, Walgreens, you know, the pharmacy, is closing 5 more stores in San Francisco, citing the cost of retail crime. So here's why we're talking about this, because across America, there's this conversation that's occurring in legislatures, state legislatures across America, but also in the federal government, that there's these things called food deserts. And food deserts are these places where you would go into a city and there would be nowhere to purchase food except maybe like a 7-Eleven, where obviously food is by far the most expensive that you could possibly purchase it. In other words, in the core city areas of many of America's declining cities, all run by Democrats, by the way, there aren't places to buy food. Well, now we have pharmacy deserts because Walgreens is closing 5 stores in San Francisco. But why are they closing? Why have these stores closed in these cities? Because there are roving organized retail gangs. They go in and there are like 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 of them, and they all take 5 or 6 things. There are only 2 people working in the entire pharmacy store, you know, maybe 3 tops, and they're not going to put their lives on the line to be able to stop these individuals. Police can't get there in time. The individuals leave with 50 to 100 things, and you do that 2, 3, 4 times a week. The pharmacy's like, we're just going to close. Forget it. We're just going to shut down. We're not even going to open this store ever again. And then you have a pharmacy desert. This is happening everywhere, Brian.
And I read this story and I read the details of it. And they said on average in San Francisco, it's $1,000 per day per store. So you have every store in San Francisco losing $365,000 a year because they're brazen about what they're doing. They're not going to be prosecuted. I don't remember. Is it California where they won't prosecute you for $2,000 or less? So what? I mean, you don't even have to be that brilliant of a criminal. I'm not going to get arrested. I'm not going to be stopped. I'm going to go in there and get $1,000 worth of stuff every day and walk out because you can do it every day. It's not a cumulative thing. I'm going to go in there. And CVS and Walgreens, they have stuff in a pharmacy for just about everyday life. So what's the point of me taking my own funds and buying something if I'm a criminal? I'm just going to go in here and steal it with my gang buddies. And they've tried to put security in, but even that wasn't stopping these guys.
And San Francisco, California, has decriminalized petty theft.
Right.
So petty theft is actually permitted.
So Mark mentioned earlier that we're elected officials. And once you're in an elected official role, you always get asked about economic development. And the truth is, it doesn't make a difference if it's a state, city, county, whatever, federal government. The role of government economic development is pretty poor. The one thing that government used to be really good at was providing security.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's uniquely their responsibility.
Public safety. Yep.
So you got these areas that are challenged, and now you have police that have been defunded, states attorneys that refuse to prosecute. As an investor, as you know, private equity money, why would you go into some of these disadvantaged neighborhoods and try to turn the local economy around if you're just going to if they're legalizing you being ripped off?
Not to mention, how about the good people that live in those neighborhoods, the people that are law-abiding citizens who are poor and they need medicine, or they need other items, personal items, and that's why they go to Walgreens and other pharmacies. And now that pharmacy is closed, and they can't even get the life-saving medicine that they need because the idiots that control the neighborhood and the politicians which make this happen are continuing to make it worse. But yet what confuses me is these people still vote in Democrats.
Well, they'll vote in Democrats, and the Democrat will get up there and give a stump speech. This is capitalism's fault.
Yeah.
This is blame capitalism. Do you know what? I'm going to give each of these people some type of voucher, some type of way of getting their medicine, and give us the power to be able to help you, because capitalism failed when it's their own failures that caused the problem.
That's exactly right. And my biggest concern for stuff like this is it does create a black market, right? So now you have the grandmothers who are living there in fear, having to buy their drugs, their medications somewhere else at an exorbitant price and in a dangerous situation.
Well, absolutely, it's a black market because the people stealing the product, they're not like using the product.
No,
they're coming out to sell the product.
To sell the product. Yeah, it's like 50% off, 20% off.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a sale going on. It's right outside of CVS.
Well, they were free to me. So.
Exactly. Yeah. What's the margin on that? Whatever you're willing to pay.
We call that Democrat economics. You know,
Exactly.
we see it every day in all the Democrat-run cities.
But this is a big deal for the rest of the nation because, I mean, I see the nation trending that way. I know in our state, we've done the same thing about lightening up in crime. And America has a crime problem right now.
It's huge.
Well, San
It's
Francisco, one of their murders are up 68% right now. Was in that same story.
Absolutely.
And we always hear, listen, if our youth are going to make it in these poverty-stricken cities, we need opportunity. Opportunity comes from a free market for people wanting to do business in there because they do it for profit. I know that profit is a mean word to them, but profit drives opportunity for everybody. Money doesn't care what color you are or anything else. It's all about opportunity.
So
and you're
true.
destroying opportunity by letting these guys go in there. The only one getting an opportunity, I guess, is the guys going in there stealing. But now they're going to run out of their opportunities too because Walgreens is gone.
Well said. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is requiring college degrees for pre-K teachers. That's right. If you're a pre-K teacher in America, even if you're in a private pre-K situation, like it could be even a daycare that also has a pre-K section in the daycare, and you own that daycare, and you have 3 and 4 year olds who are in your pre-K daycare system, they would have to get college degrees. And who wants this? Oh, the Democrats want this in Congress. They want a federal pre-K college degree requirement, and it's in their $3.5 trillion communist stimulus bill that is trying to literally take over the United States of America. Matt Morgan, what do you think of this?
Brought to you by the teachers union.
Yeah, and unions in general, basically, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to unionize private companies by requiring this and saying, well, you know, your employer now needs to pay for your college degree. Folks, let me just ask you this, Matt. Why do you need a college degree to own a daycare, let alone be a pre-K teacher? There's no college degree. Why?
I have no idea. It's interesting enough, locally, we have a local college that had a daycare center. It just closed because they couldn't run it appropriately.
What a surprise.
But yeah, I mean, they're paying back their donors, right? They're paying back their supporters on this. And that goes not only to the union membership, but also to the higher ed facilities that are originally teaching these people. And they're like, oh, well, you know, you don't have to be a full-fledged teacher. You can work with children. You can be a daycare provider.
It's also amazing, too, because essentially what the federal government's saying is you are too stupid to teach people who are 5 years old and younger. You're too dumb to do that. You need a college degree to do it. And it's like, there's this thing, like you can just buy the curricula and you can just follow it if you want to do that. And I'm pretty sure it involves simple counting and colors and shapes and tying your shoes and things like that. I'm pretty sure it's doesn't require a college degree. And the thing is there's this thing that Democrats love. It's called license to work. And if they can force you to get a license just in order to earn a living, then they can also do what? Take the license away when you don't comply.
Going back to what we've talked about all day, it's control. It's control and follow the money. And they also want another 4 years at your mind that hasn't been screwed up through 12th grade so far. We want you to go to college so we can indoctrinate you more. So then you can pass it on to the 2 to the 5-year-old.
Well, they also want to put the mom and pops businesses out of business.
Right. They hate private sector.
Matt, that's exactly it. They are the Democrat Party is trying to use this pandemic to collapse small businesses across the country. And this is one of the small businesses that deals with, of course, children. And what do they want to do? They want to first sexualize the curricula for children, and then they want to control the people that are teaching so that way they can put all their crazy communist stuff in there.
Hey, Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste.
Right. Exactly. I wish that, like they did in Baltimore City with the business owners that put the money into an escrow. They said, we're going to pay it, but we're going to put it in escrow. You're not giving me. I think if we had a national movement or a local movement where parents were able to say, listen, I'm not paying my property tax bill because you're not delivering what you promised me. I'm going to put it into an escrow account until you deliver the product you want, and let them then decide whether or not the product they're providing is worth that money or not. But it's tough to do that because people are afraid to have that movement. But right now, is anybody getting a good return on investment?
Oh, of course not. And they also want to unionize these people, right? Because most states, I should say many states, but certainly the blue states for sure, like ours, the teachers union, it's so all powerful, and it is of course a union. The teachers pay to belong to it and so forth. But the idea is let's unionize pre-K, let's unionize daycare centers, and let's do that because it's more money for the union and it's more control of your children. Because there's this other thing too in the Democrat Party that they don't think that you should be raising your children. And believe it or not, podcast listeners, my wife and I often see people and meet people, and it's hard to believe that, and sometimes they're even on our side, where they think that they shouldn't have to raise their own children, that someone else should raise their own children. And of course, my wife and I always have the same reaction, which is, why did you have children if you don't want to raise your children? You know, why do you, don't come after me. I understand the need for pre-K and daycare for the purposes of the fact that you have to go to work. I get it, right? But the fundamental child care person is you. And don't have children if you can't take care of them. I mean, it's really pretty straightforward. And with home offices and with home work, and the pandemic has driven that more, that you work from home, it's even better that you can spend more time with your children. So what do you guys think of that?
Well, they don't like that.
Right. Once again,
they want access to your child. They want this as another economic development thing for their donors, their supporters. And I think this is bad overall for society.
They hate parental control. They hate the family unit, and they will do anything in their power to disrupt that and to divide it. And that's what they're doing with this bill, because they want to put their big government hands in there. Because the sad part is all of these people think they're smarter than you and I. They think they're smarter than the average American. Anybody that believes in freedom, they're smarter than you. Let us run our lives. And that's exactly what this illustrates here is we know how to raise your 2-year-old to 5-year-old better than you're ever going to be. Better than you're ever going to know. So you give it over to us, and we'll take care of it. And what do we
got Loudoun County? Just like Loudoun County is doing right now.
And unfortunately, it's a successful model for them. If you look at it now, Matt was talking to it earlier. You have these kids walking around outside on college campuses with masks on at 80 degrees. I'm like, and it's disappointing. But where were your parents? Did they not teach you any critical thinking at all?
And when was the last time the federal government thought that its responsibility was to be able to fund pre-K across the country, and then at the same time say you can't do it unless you get a college degree? I mean, this is folks, look, we need to push back on this federal government. I mean, this federal government is out of control. I mean, who do they think they are telling us that this is not only a requirement, because they're also going to say your child needs to have pre-K. And if your child doesn't have pre-K, then you're going to be committing, child abuse. And it's like, no, actually pre-K can occur at home if you want to. It doesn't have to be in your stupid setting where you have this college degree person who's basically trying to indoctrinate my child. Final thoughts on this, gentlemen.
I think that was the allure of Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump started to give families and individuals their freedom back to make their own decision. He understood, like Ronald Reagan did, government is not the solution to your problem. Government is the problem.
Amen.
And it wasn't that he was just some great speaker like Ronald Reagan. He just had the right ideas and principles and saying, it's not up to me. It's not up to the federal government. It's up to you as a family and as an individual to go out and produce and raise your own family. And they hate that.
Go ahead, Matt.
So all the regulations that have occurred with the federal government from K through 12, higher ed. I was always in their opinion, maybe you should try to perfect some of those before you move on to take on even more responsibility.
Right.
I don't think anyone would say, hey, education's a lot better than it was 10 or 20 years ago at this point. And the same with higher ed. So, get the government out of everything.
Absolutely. And that is the final word for Mark of the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark of the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins, and to Brian Chisholm and Matt Morgan. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.